The issue is that they were not getting all that they were earning. But they're more concerned about the principle that a person is hired and part of their salary that they work for, they're not getting. They're not getting their full salary, but it's going someplace else.
Una reciente filtración ha revelado detalles preocupantes sobre el manejo de los contratos de médicos cubanos en el extranjero, específicamente en las Bahamas. Un documento obtenido por la organización independiente Archivo Cuba, con sede en Miami, muestra que el gobierno de La Habana se estaría quedando con la mayor parte del dinero pagado por los servicios de profesionales de la salud cubanos enviados a ese país caribeño. El contrato, firmado en el año 2023 entre el Ministerio de Salud de las Bahamas y la empresa estatal cubana Comercializadora de Servicios Médicos Cubanos, establece que por los servicios de 4 profesionales, 2 asesores médicos especialistas, un ingeniero informático y un especialista en datos de salud, el gobierno bahameño debía pagar $22,000 mensuales. Sin embargo, estos trabajadores solo recibían entre $900 y $90,200 mensuales cada uno, lo que equivale a un total de $4,380, una cifra muy por debajo del monto total pagado. El resto del dinero, entre el 84 y el 92%, iba directamente a manos del Estado cubano. Además, la empresa estatal cubana cobraba también la mitad del valor de las horas extras y bonificaciones que se otorgaban a estos trabajadores, lo que refuerza las denuncias sobre una relación económica profundamente desigual. El contrato, cuya autenticidad no ha sido cuestionada por las autoridades bahameñas, parecía llevar la firma del ministro de Salud de ese país, Michael Darville, y fue suscrito en La Habana, aunque la copia filtrada no especifica la fecha exacta. A pesar de que Cuba ha presentado estas misiones como actos de solidaridad internacional, en los últimos años se han convertido en una fuente clave de ingresos para el gobierno. Desde el año 2020, el Departamento de Estado de Estados Unidos mantiene a Cuba en la lista de países que no hacen lo suficiente para combatir la trata de personas, citando precisamente estas misiones médicas como ejemplos de trabajo forzado. Existen testimonios de profesionales que desertaron de estas misiones y han denunciado que sus pasaportes les son confiscados, que sus movimientos están restringidos y que reciben presiones para participar en actividades políticas en favor del régimen cubano. Uno de los elementos más preocupantes del contrato filtrado es que las autoridades bahameñas cedieron a la entidad cubana no solo la mayor parte del dinero, sino también el control disciplinario sobre los profesionales, eximiendo a Cuba de responsabilidad legal en caso de conflicto. Además, la ley aplicable al contrato sería la de las Bahamas, pero con una salvedad significativa. No debía contradecir los principios del sistema político y social de la República de Cuba. El documento también estipulaba que Cuba podía retirar a sus médicos en cualquier momento y que si las Bahamas accedía a cancelar el contrato para renegociar mejores condiciones, seguiría estando obligada a cumplir los pagos estipulados. Estas condiciones contractuales muestran claramente una estructura diseñada para beneficiar exclusivamente al gobierno cubano, con muy poca consideración por el bienestar de sus propios profesionales. Frente a las crecientes críticas, el primer ministro de las Bahamas, Philip Davis, anunció que su país renegociará los contratos laborales con Cuba. En sus palabras, cualquiera que contratemos le pagaremos directamente a su cuenta.
The issue is that they were not getting all that they were earning. They earn $100, and part of that $100 is being paid back to the U.S. government. It wasn't the amount. It was to Cuba. It was the principle, not the amount. But they're more concerned about the principle that a person is hired and part of their salary that they work for, they're not getting. They're not getting their full salary, but it's going someplace else. So we will address that. And we will, anyone we hire, we'll say, look, we'll have to pay you directly into your account.
Esta promesa representa un cambio significativo en la forma en que se han gestionado estas misiones hasta ahora. No obstante, Davis no confirmó si hará públicos los contratos ni ofreció un cronograma para la implementación de este nuevo sistema de pagos directos. También reconoció que ciertos aspectos del contrato podrían interpretarse como señales de trabajo forzado, especialmente la entrega de salarios al gobierno cubano y la retención de pasaportes. La polémica ha llegado a la arena diplomática. El senador estadounidense Marco Rubio ha calificado estas misiones como trabajo forzado y ha impulsado sanciones de visado contra funcionarios cubanos y también contra representantes de terceros países involucrados en estos esquemas. Durante una reciente visita a Washington, Davis discutió el tema con Rubio y otros funcionarios estadounidenses, asegurando que si encontraban evidencias de irregularidades, serían corregidas. La directora de Archivo Cuba, María Huerlau, ha sido una de las voces más insistentes en denunciar estas prácticas. Asegura que no basta con que los gobiernos paguen directamente a los médicos, ya que el régimen cubano ha desarrollado métodos para seguir confiscando gran parte del salario mediante transferencias a cuentas en Cuba o mecanismos de presión.
Eso es una fórmula que te dan ellos. Un ejemplo, contabilidad del país donde tú estás. Te da el payslip. Ahí viene todo lo que tú ganaste en el mes. Viene desglosado ahí, ¿me entiendes? Por hora y la cantidad de dinero que cobra al final. Entonces tú coges la cantidad de dinero que tú tienes del pago, lo coges, tú me entiendes, sacas lo que no es remesable, que es transportación, alimentación, nocturnidad, y no me acuerdo de otra cosa. Y entonces lo que es remesable, sumas todo eso y lo divides entre dos, que es la mitad. Y lo que te da es lo que se le remesa a la cuenta de contabilidad de la brigada cubana. Es como es. Y tienes que anexar el documento que te da contabilidad del país donde tú estás. Tienes que anexarlo con el documento que tú llenas, ¿tú me entiendes? Porque no son bobos. Y entonces ellos, cuando tú se lo envías a ellos, va el chofer de la brigada por los distintos lugares recogiendo eso. Y el jefe de brigada se lo entrega en un sobre. Después en un sobre con el nombre de cada colaborador. Entonces ellos cogen automáticamente, sacan cuenta, ¿tú me entiendes? De lo que tú tienes que dar. A veces está bien con lo que tú reportaste.
En este complejo panorama, hay al menos 2 gobiernos caribeños que han afirmado no tener las mismas condiciones en sus contratos con Cuba, aunque esta afirmación no puede verificarse de manera independiente debido a la confidencialidad que rodea estos acuerdos. Precisamente, el contrato con las Bahamas incluye una cláusula que prohíbe revelar sus términos durante 2 años después de su firma, lo que limita el escrutinio público y la rendición de cuentas. Lo cierto es que el modelo de exportación de servicios médicos ha sido una fuente importante de ingresos para el régimen cubano durante décadas, pero también ha estado rodeado de denuncias por coerción, vigilancia política y condiciones laborales injustas. Las revelaciones actuales no hacen más que profundizar las sospechas sobre la verdadera naturaleza de estas misiones y el rol que juegan los gobiernos que las contratan. La pregunta que queda en el aire es si este modelo seguirá vigente o si finalmente se tomará el camino de la transparencia, el respeto a los derechos laborales y la eliminación de cualquier forma de trata de personas, sea esta directa o disfrazada de cooperación médica. Y ahora te invitamos a que nos dejes tu opinión. ¿Crees que estas misiones médicas son una forma moderna de trabajo forzado? ¿Deberían los gobiernos extranjeros pagar directamente a los médicos cubanos sin intermediación del régimen? ¿Qué impacto crees que tendría esto en la economía cubana y en la vida de los profesionales de la salud? Déjanos tus respuestas en los comentarios. Suscríbete al canal para mantenerte informado sobre la realidad de Cuba y el contexto internacional que la rodea. Dale like al video si te pareció útil y compártelo para que más personas conozcan lo que está ocurriendo. Nos vemos en el próximo análisis en Cuba Actualidad.
So, questions?
Prime Minister, you spoke about the issue regarding the Cuban healthcare workers that was brought up to the Secretary of State. Now, back in March, he announced visa sanctions against governments that are part of what they were calling the forced labor program. Did that come up in discussions? Did he agree to retract that, or is that still?
No, certainly. Well, no, certainly. What the secretary affirmed was that any country that is engaged in forced labor, they would have a policy of restricting visas to officials in that country. But the question is whether you are engaged in forced labor, and that we were able to say to them, and I think they were satisfied, that we are not engaged in forced labor that we are aware of. So if forced labor is occurring in our country with the Cubans, there's no evidence that we have come across. Now, what we are doing now, what we've been doing in the last several weeks, is to identify what I call ingredients of forced labor, to see whether any of those are present in relation to any of the workers here in the Bahamas. And if we discover that, that will be corrected. So we will address that. And we will, anyone we hire, we'll say, look, we'll have to pay you directly into your account. Thank you.
I know that you mentioned Haiti, and you also mentioned that a lot of the conversations were about national security. Did the U.S. pledge any support to the Bahamas to stop irregular migration flows?
Oh, yes, through UpBat, we talk about enhancing and providing more resources in what I call the UpBack operations that I mentioned. And there's a Caribbean security initiative through that process. And they have pledged to continue to work with the multilateral mission to bring stability in Haiti, and to demonstrate their commitment to it. Just before we left, they had put two gang leaders. They had sanctioned two gang leaders because they believe that they're being supported by persons who might be living in the United States. And the only way they'll be able to identify that is once they're sanctioned, then they could deal with the persons in the United States who are providing them with the funding. So they are committed to assist us. We also spoke about the processing of irregular migrants by providing some assistance. As you know, we are at the front line of that issue, disproportionately, as I mentioned, and we bear the cost of repatriation, housing before repatriation. And so discussions are being held, and there's an acknowledgement to that, and discussions will continue. Something to do with, breaching, privacy and setting up other security matters that will serve China's interests. But each of the leaders there assured the United States we will be vigilant in anything that crosses the diplomatic line, as we call it, and so we're not able to explain that to them, and just let's say this issue of China, the concerns about China, just didn't arise. It arose with me in 2022 under the previous administration. The issue of the Cuban nurses just didn't arise today either or now. It was again raised in 2022, and I had to address both of those at the it was the Summit of America in Los Angeles. And if you could find my contribution to that, you'll see what I had to say in respect to both of those. In respect to the nurses, I was very clear. What am I to do when you are taking my nurses? In respect to China, I said, well, where there's a vacuum, well, I say, well, a vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum. And so these issues are rising. I say they are not new issues for the region. And I think it'll be ongoing, just to keep all of us honest and vigilant on the issues that concern both nations.
Good afternoon, PM. I know that going back to the firearm trafficking discussion, I know that in 2023, when former Vice President Kamala Harris visited, she announced the position of coordinator Caribbean firearms prosecution. Did that come up in the meeting? Is that position still existing? What is the way forward with that, or has there been any results?
Well, the one result that came out of the meeting we had with Kamala Harris is that they have now sort of made it a federal offense for what they call straw purchases of weapons. One of the things we have pointed out that our own police force have been able to say, and I was able to say to the authorities, that the guns are be able to trace the guns back to the gun shops when they were sold. The gun shops are able to identify the purchaser, and in some instances that one purchaser would have acquired sometimes up to 30 and 40 guns. And so they have now made it an offense for what they call straw purchases of guns, people buying guns on behalf of others. Now, we'd want them to go further, and it's one of the things I indicated to it in the meeting, that perhaps they need to go further, that if they're able to discover a purchaser of guns, and one of those guns are found in the Bahamas being used in an offense, that purchaser ought to be made to account for the rest of the guns they would have bought, because there has to be some inference or some presumption that that person may be specifically a straw purchaser and or just a trafficker buying guns for the purposes of export illegally to countries in the Caribbean. And that is something that's being taken under advisement as well, just to strengthen the laws in the United States for that purposes. This is an ongoing discussion because whenever it is a serious issue, both for the United States and the Caribbean, and we will continue to work and collaborate together to see how we could suppress the trafficking of guns. It is acknowledged by the U.S. authorities that guns are not manufactured in the Caribbean, and they also acknowledge that most of the guns that are in the Caribbean emanates from Florida, and more attention is going to be paid to that. I think one of what is heartening for us here in the Caribbean and us here, particularly in the Bahamas, is that Senator Rubio, he's not just hearing about these challenges. He's aware of it and has experienced some of these issues because he's a neighbor. He's from South Florida, went to school, high school in South Florida, and he'll tell you that Bahamians or Bahamian persons, teachers taught him while he was in school. So so he'll be addressing these issues not just from what I call the root of what is written in a book or what is told to him. He would, what I call, have a lived experience of these issues that we have.
Hi, yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The latest U.S. narcotics report would have made some allegations that the country has some anti-financial crime deficiencies. Were the contents of that report discussed? And I guess, did you reinforce the strength of our AML CFTs?
Well, no, I did that. That was discussed with the Secretary of Treasury. As you know, we had we were set up for a 2-hour meeting with Secretary Rubio, and I think what is disturbing about the report is the suggestion that we don't have the political will to process or to be more engaged in the enforcement of the anti-money terrorism financing regime. But we do. Part of our challenges is our limited resource to have what I call the a robust intelligence regime. And we expect that we should have a shared position on intelligence sharing, which they agreed to. And I think that will help them to appreciate where we are with what they call our engagement in the anti-money laundering, and the anti-terrorism financing issues.
And second question, I know you didn't speak directly about the tariffs, but from a regional standpoint, were there discussions about the Caribbean Basin Initiative, the trade agreement that we have with them that I think is valid until 2030?
We did not speak about that. That is more economic. And the Bahamas really did not benefit materially from that. It was more the Southern Caribbean, and that topic didn't come up with me. It didn't come up with Rubio, nor did it come up with the Secretary of Treasury. But what did come was the Caribbean Security Initiative, how we could collaborate in the security issues that impact our region and the United States.
Okay, good. We have there's 3 more questions.
Mr. Davis, just one question from me. I know that you have said that you are currently, investigating in terms of the Cuban labor. I just wanted to know with the lease contract and documents that were reported on by the Según and the Miami Herald, is there any possibility that these contracts will be publicized?
It's contracts.
The contract that was talking about the Cuban labor?
Well, they were publicized already. They were publicized already. So why would we want to publicize them anymore? What I can say to you is that we are in the process